Good afternoon, everyone. See, today we'll be doing first of all, this session of mine is going to cover a lot of words, helping you to prepare vocabulary. All of us know that when it comes to words, we really need to prepare some good words, and probably for our questions or fill in the blanks, or also these words that I'm teaching you today will help you in preparing for certain tone words. Plus also these can be words where they are asking you different, they might be in the same bracket, but the meaning of these words might be quite different. So we are doing words of a feather. Words of a feather would mean, first of all, when I say words of a feather, that means they all belong to the same bracket, or they are of the same kind, but there is a differentiation in the meaning of each word. So that's why they're saying birds of the same feather. So these are all related to some kind of speaking. And then we'll also classify these words, whether these words are positive or negative. Okay, so we will look at these words in usage form. Plus, we can form some sentences around these words so that it helps us to recall these words whenever we want to use them, or probably know the differentiation in meanings. Now, for example, when I say a line, something like that, something here, he is a person. Let's keep one person. Let's make one, let's identify with an individual. Let's keep our person. Now, here is our individual. This is me teaching you, and here's this person. Let's keep a name for this man. So he's one of my student who's interested in learning words today, and let's name him and frame sentences around him. So let's give him a funny name, and his name is Verbal. He's a verbal. So he's a Mr. Verbal. So Mr. Verbal, he's often seen. What is he seen? He's seen, often seen, but rarely heard. He's always seen in the classes, but he's never heard. But you can't hear him. So that means he rarely speaks. He's seen in the classes. Mr. Verbal is seen, but rarely heard. Now look at how, and light, he does light chit chat. He will spawn. He will never say an extra word. He will never say an extra word. Though his name is Verbal, yet he will never say an extra word. So what is this? So what kind of an individual is Verbal? So what will we call him? He will never say an extra word. Can you look at it? He's seen in the classes. He's always seen, but rarely heard. He will never say an extra word. So what kind of personality would we give to this Verbal? So Verbal is a very taciturn person. Taciturn means, now you will always remember, his mouth opens very limited. His mouth is usually sealed. He will never say, and he's a taciturn. That means he likes to be a person, uses very limited words. These can also be people who could be introverts. They are opposites to the talkative. On the other hand, so this Verbal person is a taciturn. Though his name is Verbal, yet he's a taciturn. So for our first word that we prepare for the day is taciturns. These are people who could be absolutely introverts. They can also be people who would speak less, use limited number of words. And these are also people who confine to, keeping quiet only. They are people who are quiet. So here we can also say these are quiet. These could also be, I'm giving you 2-3 synonyms to the word so that we can remember. These could be reticent. So Verbal is a reticent person. He is a taciturn. He is untalkative. Probably also he could also be a quiet person. So our first word is, I'm giving you a sentence also so that you can, we are doing words of the feather, so I'm going to talk about all kinds of the same. So the first word, and towards the end, we'll make a list. Okay, so the first word that we've done is taciturn. That means these are taciturn people who would usually speak less. They are reticents. They are quiet. Quiet is one word we know. Next one. Here comes our Verbal again. So now Verbal this time, sometimes Verbal goes to his village. Verbal in the village, what will he do? He talks and talks. He talks and talks. Verbal talks. But when in the classes, he won't do this. But he goes to his village. This verbal goes to the village and then talks a lot. He talks a lot. And he goes on. He goes on. And then sometimes he can also be when he talks so much, he talks. So what would we say to him? Then he is loquacious. He is loquacious. He's so talkative that sometimes, he's loquacious. So can we do some more words with loquacious? He is garrulous. He's garrulous. What does this verbal, when he goes to his village, he talks and talks, and he goes on. He goes on. That means this verbal really becomes the verbal in his village. He is loquacious, garrulous, and sometimes he could be boring also. And when he goes on, so obviously he goes on and he uses so many words, he becomes a bore. Then for people, he can become a bore also. At that point, he is verbose. He is verbose. So in the classes, he is seen, not heard. And he usually remains quiet. He would not say an extra word. That time he was a taciturn, but when he goes to his village, गांव जाते ही verbal के अंदर का talkative person comes out. So he becomes very talkative. He becomes talkative, and that time, there is no stopping for him. He goes on and on. So that time he becomes loquacious and garrulous and talkative. But because it goes on, so people find him very bored. So he becomes verbose. He becomes verbose. Clear? So our verbal becomes verbose in village, but becomes taciturn when he comes back to his classes. Okay. Now, again, we have our verbal. Now, this time verbal is doing what? Let's look at our verbal doing what this time. Okay. So sometimes his voice is loud. Sometimes he speaks so loud. His voice is loud. So his voice is loud. Okay. And resonant. And his vocabulary, I don't know what happened. And his vocab is fantastic. He demonstrates fantastic vocabulary. And his voice is loud. So then what is then, but there is no meaning. His voice is very loud and resonant. His vocabulary fantastic. No meaning, but there is no meaning in his, there is no meaning in his rant. So what happens is then what do we call verbal at this point of time? If you can see here. So verbal at this point of time where he shows off his vocabulary. To villagers, he wants to, because he's studying in a city, he wants to show off vocabulary. He is really that person who, he rants. His voice is loud and he shows off his vocabulary. So can you see what is he? What can he be doing? He becomes he uses this fantastic vocabulary to show off in his rant. So then this verbal sometimes becomes, so the word we are doing is bombastic. He becomes bombastic. He's so bombastic. So can we just look at it now? What are these words going to be when we say bombastic? That means he shows off his pompous. He's a rant, which is having no meaning, but basically he shows it off. He could be pompous in his behavior. He's pompous because he shows off. And the kind of vocabulary he uses is basically saying so that he wants to show off to his village friends that, he is really, really knowing English so well. So it is pompous, he could be bombastic, and it could be ranting. Another word that we can do with this is, if you want to, because the kind of words he uses, he is pleonastic. Pleonastic is also, he's repetitive, verbose. This is very close to verbose also, pleonastic. He's pompous in his approach towards words. He demonstrates, high flair words. He uses vocabulary. He flaunts his vocabulary. So here verbal becomes, because see, he's gone to his village and then he's going on and on. He's very pleonastic. He demonstrates high words to people to show off that, his speech becomes bombastic. And he is ranting. He rants. And there is no meaning in his rant. He's just showing them. He's just being pompous. There is no meaning in his rant. So he shows off his vocabulary, which is clearly demonstrating what happens to a verbal. At this point, when I teach you about 10 words, then I'm doing a collection of these words. Now, let's do one more here. Now a verbal, there's a friend of his in village, his close friend. Now this verbal at this point, a character verbal, so here what does he do? His words have neither, when he's going on with his ranting, his words have neither reason nor rhyme. His words have no reason or no rhyme. Whatever he's speaking, he's just speaking. He's just ranting. So there could be other word we can do with this. So what can be the word when he just wants to show off his vocabulary to those friends in village? So what happens is he's just going on blabbering. He goes on with blabber and he doesn't make any sense. There is no reason, no rhyme in his speaking because he just wants to flaunt, show off. But when he's speaking without any reason, so here it is just blabbering. So what can we say to this? Which can be this can be, now the words that we are doing is, he is gibberish. Gibberish in his mannerism. So what is he? He becomes, his words have neither reason or rhyme. He's just talking gibberish. We can take another word with this. Gibberish means nonsensical, rubbish, mumbo jumbo. He's mumbo jumbo. Have you seen? A lot of children will, young, babies, they keep on making sounds and now they don't make any sense. So here, this is gibberish, or another one, foolish talk, no sense, no reason, balderdash, 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 gibberish. On another one, we can just do mumbo jumbo, or he also talks rubbish, gobbledygook. So here's another word I'm doing, gobbledygook. These are 4 different. That means it is all hogwash. It is all hogwash. Nothing, because keep the reason here. See, now if you can see, no reason, no rhyme. He's just speaking, no reason, no rhyme. Have you seen? Remember babies? They keep on making sounds and that's no reason. So that kind of, because he was just flaunting he just wants to show off his vocabulary. So this time verbal has no reason, no rhyming. His talk becomes gibberish, balderdash, or hogwash. Gobbledygook. Another word, these are all synonyms for no reason, no rhyme, nonsensical talk. I'm not writing any word that would not be related. So here, sometime our verbal is what? Can we just do okay, few more I'll teach you and then we can go and do a, summary of what kind of words have we learned. Okay, now. Okay, so here, now again, his friends would do what? His friends are, if he's a charming man, now, here what we're doing is, we can also look at it, when he speaks in Hindi, but when this verbal, it comes to speaking in Hindi, he has got good command over language. In English, he speaks anything. He would say anything. He would start speaking balderdash so that it doesn't make sense. But when it comes to Hindi, he becomes, he begins to fib. He's having so much of artistry in speaking. In Hindi, he has a total control. So he had artistry. Even that, he has artistry. You must admit, he's very glib. He's very fluent in Hindi. He has artistry. Even in his lies, he is very glib. So we can do some more words for glib here. So if you can see here, the word for glib could be something that, he's very fluent. He is, he's a smooth talker. He talks very smooth spoken. He's silver tongued. He has artistry in speaking. Artistry in speaking. You know, he speaks so fluent. So smooth, he is somebody who's fluent, who's voluble. So we can take words as fluent, glib. We can also take somebody who's very smooth tongued or silver tongued, smooth tongued. So if you can see here, these are all synonyms. See, these two words that I'm drawing out as lines here, this is equal to, basically, they are all synonymous words. So when somebody has artistry in speaking, for example, we can just see here, in Hindi, he becomes absolutely fluent. If I can give you names of some great orators, if you look at Prime Minister Modi, he's very glib. If you look at Shashi Tharoor, he's very fluent. He has a smooth-tongued approach. He's even silver-tongued. But sometimes, you know, the words that he speaks are very highfalutin, and those kind of words, sometimes he becomes pompous. So here we can have words. If you look at Prime Minister Modi, he's very glib and fluent. He's a great orator. He's smooth-tongued. But on the same thing is applicable to our Shashi Tharoor as well. But sometimes, you know, his speech becomes a little, because it's loaded with words and vocabulary. So they seemingly mean as if he's pompous, and he shows off his vocabulary. So there it becomes the fluent and the smooth tongue becomes a little bombastic. Okay, so he can be glib in Hindi, but he is a taciturn when it comes to your words, when it comes to speaking in class now. But, you know, in Hindi, he's not only glib, but he becomes a verbal becomes a very charming man. You know, he becomes a charming man, and you know, he was asked last year by one of the parties in the village to go and give a speech in their favor, and he really was able to charm with his speaking. He could charm audiences. So verbal was able to charm audiences. He was very convincing, and he was able to charm. So he is, as a speaker in Hindi, sometimes he has his charisma. He's charismatic. So a leader can be charismatic, or even in speaking, one can have a charisma. So he is very charismatic, meaning here we can also say he is very influential. He could be appealing. It could be appealing. So he is charismatic, he is appealing, you know, as influential. These could be all words that one can use. When it comes to charismatic, it can also, he is able to fascinate people. He's able to influence people. He attracts audiences. So here, easily we can relate the word not only with the word with speaking, but it can be somebody who can be fascinating, or it can be enchanting. Enchanting. Now, can we relate this to Prime Minister Modi again? You know, he's very glib and he is appealing. He's very charismatic as a leader. He is enchanting. He could be even magnetic and appealing. So appealing would mean, you know, he appeals to the people, and people are enchanted by, or they are basically attracted by. He has a magnetic pull. He has a magnetic pull. So here, our verbal, you know, in Hindi, he's very glib and fluent, and also is able to convince people with the kind of words he uses in Hindi. He is appealing, and he can also be engaging. He engages audiences, and his speech becomes very riveting. Speeches become riveting, and people are charmed by it. And so he becomes he can be, and sometimes it could be a very absorbing speech. It can become an absorbing speech. And then what happens is he becomes a charismatic person. He charms people, he attracts them, he is fascinating them. So he becomes charismatic when it comes to, so that is why he was approached by a local party asked the local party of the region, asked him to deliver the speech so that people could be enchanted, or they could be engrossed, or it could be it became as a captivating speech. The audiences were really captivated by how he spoke. So then, next word of the same feather. Can you see we are talking about all kinds of what can be a person? And when somebody and at that point verbal immediately refused speaking in English. He said, I'm not going to speak in English. I'll only The verbal person said that I'm going to only speak Hindi, is my native language, so I am going to speak in Hindi, and I am going to only speak in my own language. He refuses to speak in English. He only uses the So what kind of language is he using? We can say here it is vernacular. He conducted himself in a vernacular, his own language. He refuses to speak English. He refuses to speak another language, but only refers to his own language. So he only uses the vernacular. He only uses vernacular. Okay, so the word is vernacular, whereas that means using only a language that is known, or that's your own language, that is a language or dialect spoken by ordinary people. That's why he became so charismatic. So vernacular would mean what? That is basically a language which is understood by the masses. So to relate to the masses, what did he say? I'm going to only speak vernacular. The way people use language in a specific country or region is a vernacular person. So obviously he was addressing the common people. That's why he said, I will use only everyday language. So here we can also take colloquial. Okay, a native speech. So he used Hindi, he refused to speak. He used the dialect, which was very popular with the people. And he's a smooth speaker, so he's glib, he's very fluent, and he uses the vernacular. He uses only vernacular. He does not use a native speech. A native speech is what we call this everyday language, is what we call as vernacular. So a native speech, a local, uh, a, a speech which is the dialect of that region. It's also a common man speech. So back home, we speak a dialect which is very popular in that region. So Hindi can be a vernacular for North India, and it could be a language of the common man, or a dialect where it's a kind of dialect. It can also be another word that you can do is dialectical. That means a dialect of that region, area where it is spoken. So in English could be a vernacular for people who are living in England, but Hindi a vernacular for people of the north. So regional language, a dialect of the region, is vernacular or colloquial. Okay, next one. So he used the Hindi, he's glib, and he's charismatic. Okay, so we are relating our story gradually, and this is another word that we do here. So here, we can do another word. So he preached a lot. He in his speech. So in his speech, what did this vernacular do this time? What is he doing? He was trying to convince people, but from convincing, he became a little preachy also. And what would be that word for that? So in his speech, he was he used pedagogy. Okay, so we can use another word here where we are talking about what he's doing is he's basically trying to preach. His students are not serious, so his listeners might not be serious. So what is this word meaning? A method or practice of teaching, as in, he started speaking in theoretical language. When you speak, you're basically educating people. You are educating. So here he started educating, schooling, he started teaching them. Right? His speech it became more like a teaching. So our verbal, while he was delivering his speech, he went on into the border of teaching. He starts teaching. like a teacher in a class. His speech became more of an instruction to people. He started instructing people, or he was basically trying to teach them, educate them. So it's a formal act. So what do we call to such kind of a word? A formal act of teaching, or a profession of educating. So he started educating them. So here, what will we call this as a word? He became his pedagogy, or he became instructional, formal teaching. He started to, he acted more like a pedagogue, a pedagogy. So pedagogy is instructions, could be teachings, could also be schooling. He started educating. So he started and giving it more like a theory. In his speech, he was giving theories to people. So he started, instructing them. He started educating them. So another word could be, he started schooling them. Schooling, as if you're giving instruction to small kids. So that's a pedagogy. And he started acting as our verbal became a pedagogue at that point. He became a pedagogue. He was his pedagogue. He's his teaching, instruction, schooling, and educating people with instructions. With instructions. So that becomes a pedagogue. He became a pedagogue. Okay. Then next word and the last word that we are doing, and after that we're going to be collecting all the words we have done. So here's another word. See, if you can see here, whenever you would be joining any of the law schools, probably you will understand that every law school will have its own pedagogy. That means a teaching mechanism. So now, his arguments to people. Now, the last word that we are doing, his argument or his reasoning, the reasoning that verbal was using, or arguments that he was using. Now, look at this, that they were very sound. They looked very sound. The reasoning and the arguments were very sound. They sounded correct to people, but are actually false. But they were false. They are false. Whatsoever arguments he was making, they were sound. They sounded that they were correct, but they are false. This is a kind of deception. Usually if you see here, this is more like a deception. Okay. So what kind of a speech is this? What this speech is all. So then verbal speech became what? At this point, verbal speech became total sophistry. A lot of times people will use sophistry to prove a point while the contrary is true. They would just make sophistry. It could be a deceit argument also. Sometimes you are giving some kind of incorrect line of thought. That time it might sound correct, but in reality it is wrong. So another word for this could be, he was basically trying deception. This could also be something would be, if you know of this word, it is an obscure argument, obscurity, ambiguity, deception. So he is using, so here we can use another word for this. These are people who would, at the to win an argument, they would give a reason which might sound correct, but in fact in the real world it is wrong. In the real world it is wrong. So that is what sophistry means. So sophistry as a word is not a very positive word. It is basically a negative connotation word. It's a negative connotation. A fallacious, we can have another here, a word here, a fallacious argument. A fallacious argument. And this is clever but false argument. Sometimes sophistry might be tried by lawyers to win an argument. Okay, another one. It's a false belief. Fallacious argument, it's a false belief. So we've done about 15 to 20 words all related with our character verbal. So can we just sum up? he does not speak. He, verbal, does not speak. So he is a taciturn. You remember? Talkative, taciturn. Sorry, I'm so sorry, reserved. But he speaks a lot. When he goes to his village, he goes on and he speaks a lot. Then he's a taciturn. He's garrulous. Okay, when you just see then he uses bores people, verbose. He bores. Another thing that he does, but when it comes to vernacular, he's very glib. Okay? He's very glib. And he can charm you with his speech. He's charismatic. Can you see? But from charisma, he starts teaching people. Then he can sound more like a pedagogue. Yeah. And another thing could be that he might use fallacious arguments to prove his points, and then his speech becomes sophistry. These are some words we did, but a lot of English speaking, he wanted to just show his vocabulary. His speech can become bombastic, and when it has no rhyme or reason, then it becomes, somebody who has no rhyme or reason can become gibberish. Can you see? Just by doing words of this is all with our verbal. These are about 10 of them, and with each of these, I've given you 3 words. See, by just keeping our character verbal, we have done so many words with him, which are of the same feather. Thank you so much for being patient and listening to words. We'll meet again with another kind of vocabulary session, continuing with our verbal character. Okay, thank you.